He had everything money could buy, a billionaire pharmaceutical heir who thought he could purchase his way through life itself. In 2025, Marcus Wellington paid $10,000 for the ultimate trophy hunt in South Africa. But what he didn't know was that he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the hunted, and nature was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth about what really happened on that fateful day in the African savanna. When you possess unlimited wealth, the world often transforms into a meticulously crafted playground, designed exclusively to cater to your every whim and desire. Marcus Wellington III, at 52 years of age, had never, not for a single fleeting moment, experienced the raw, unvarnished sting of genuine struggle. His birthright was not merely a name, but an entire empire. The Wellington pharmaceutical dynasty, a colossal entity that had meticulously amassed its staggering fortune over decades, meticulously controlling and influencing the global medication industry. Marcus inherited not just an unimaginable sum of money, but also an insidious blend of power, pervasive influence, and most dangerously, the deeply ingrained, almost pathological belief that every conceivable problem in life, no matter how complex or profound, could ultimately be resolved with the mere stroke of a sufficiently large check. His late father, Dr. Robert Wellington, had been the architect of this colossal empire, a man whose relentless ambition had touched the lives of millions across the globe, often dictating the very rhythm of their health and well-being. Yet, paradoxically, within the opulent, gilded walls of the Wellington family mansion, there had always resided a profound, echoing emptiness, a spiritual void that no amount of meticulously formulated prescription pills, no matter how potent or expensive, could ever hope to fill. Marcus's childhood was a detached observation of his father's obsessive work ethic, a man who relentlessly accumulated wealth while his marriage slowly but irrevocably crumbled, his personal relationships withered into brittle husks, and his own health, despite having unfettered access to the world's most cutting-edge medical care, steadily deteriorated. By the time Robert Wellington finally succumbed to the inevitable at the age of 73, Marcus had already inherited a fortune so astronomically vast that even the most seasoned financial advisors struggled to accurately calculate its exact, dizzying value. The young heir found himself in possession of something far more perilous than mere money itself. An absolute, unyielding freedom from consequences, a dangerous illusion of invincibility that would ultimately define his existence. The years that followed his father's passing were characterized by an unending, almost monotonous parade of extravagant acquisitions and fleeting experiences, each one leaving Marcus feeling progressively more hollow, more disconnected from any genuine sense of purpose. He acquired a sprawling penthouse in the heart of Manhattan, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panoramic vista of Central Park, a verdant oasis dwarfed by the concrete jungle. He purchased an equally sprawling estate in the exclusive Hamptons, a private jet that stood perpetually on standby, ready to whisk him away to any corner of the globe at a moment's notice, and a meticulously curated collection of exotic, high-performance automobiles that most ordinary individuals would only ever glimpse in the glossy pages of magazines or on the silver screen. He married Sarah, a woman of striking beauty who hailed from an equally affluent and influential family, and for a fleeting, ephemeral moment, Marcus genuinely believed he had finally stumbled upon the elusive missing piece to his meticulously constructed, yet ultimately fragile life. But Sarah, possessing an intellect far sharper and a perception far keener than Marcus had ever given her credit for, was astute enough to see through the glittering facade of his immense wealth. She recognized, with an almost unsettling clarity, the profound spiritual bankruptcy that festered beneath his impeccably tailored designer suits and his ostentatiously expensive watches. Their marriage, a union of convenience and expectation rather than genuine affection, limped along for a mere 7 years before Sarah, with a quiet dignity that Marcus found both infuriating and admirable, filed for divorce. She departed with a settlement that would have rendered most people independently wealthy for 10 lifetimes. Yet somehow, her departure left Marcus feeling more profoundly impoverished, more utterly bereft than he had ever felt before. In her final, carefully penned letter to him, Sarah articulated a sentiment that would, unbeknownst to Marcus at the time, echo relentlessly in the chambers of his mind for the remainder of his days. You possess everything, Marcus. Everything except the one thing that truly matters, the authentic capacity to feel genuinely alive. Those poignant, accusatory words reverberated with an almost physical intensity within Marcus's mind as he sat in solitary splendor in his Manhattan penthouse, a silent sentinel amidst an array of priceless art and antique furniture. Below him, the sprawling tapestry of city lights flickered and pulsed, a distant, indifferent constellation against the inky blackness of the night sky. He had, with an almost desperate fervor, attempted to extract meaning and fulfillment from every conceivable avenue that his vast fortune could open. He had, on numerous occasions, funded various charitable organizations, though even he harbored a cynical suspicion that his motivations were more rooted in strategic tax benefits than in any genuine altruistic compassion. He had invested heavily in a myriad of cutting-edge technology companies, harboring a faint, almost desperate hope that perhaps innovation, in its purest form, might somehow manage to fill the gaping void that gnawed relentlessly within him. He had even, in a moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability, subjected himself to therapy with the most exorbitantly priced and highly acclaimed psychiatrists in New York, only to discover that they seemed far more preoccupied with dissecting the intricate traumas of his privileged childhood than with actually helping him to experience anything remotely resembling authentic emotion. By the year 2024, Marcus Wellington had devolved into a man consumed by a desperate, almost frantic search for an experience that money could still somehow purchase, an experience that would finally make him feel truly alive, an experience that would unequivocally prove to him that his existence held some profound significance beyond the endless string of zeros in his meticulously managed bank account. It was during a casual, yet ultimately pivotal conversation with one of his more adventurous business associates that Marcus first stumbled upon the concept of the exclusive, high-stakes safari hunting experience in the remote, untamed wilderness of South Africa. The associate, a brash and self-assured venture capitalist named Derek Hutchins, had recently returned from his own hunting expedition, his eyes still alight with the thrill of the chase, his voice imbued with a raw, primal excitement that seemed to ignite a long-dormant spark deep within Marcus's jaded soul. Derek recounted, with vivid, almost cinematic detail, the exhilarating moment he had successfully taken down a majestic lion, describing the electrifying rush of adrenaline that had surged through his veins, the profound, almost spiritual feeling of being a true predator in one of the world's most unforgiving and dangerous ecosystems. He spoke at length about the highly skilled and experienced guides who had meticulously trained him, the state-of-the-art weaponry that had been provided, and most importantly, he waxed lyrical about the overwhelming sense of accomplishment, the profound validation that stemmed from the act of conquering nature itself. Derek, with a knowing wink, casually mentioned that there existed a particular safari company, an almost mythical entity, that catered exclusively to an ultra-wealthy, discerning clientele, a place where, for the right, astronomical price, one could hunt virtually any animal that roamed the vast, untamed expanses of the African continent. The allure of such an experience, Derek emphasized, transcended the mere act of hunting. It was about the unparalleled exclusivity, the palpable danger, and the undeniable, irrefutable proof that one possessed the immense financial resources and the sheer, unadulterated courage to undertake something that the vast majority of humanity could never even begin to conceive, let alone attempt. Marcus, a man accustomed to having his every whim instantly gratified, became utterly consumed by this audacious idea. He delved into obsessive research of the aforementioned safari company, meticulously poring over glowing reviews penned by other equally wealthy clients who had participated in their exclusive hunts. He immersed himself in an exhaustive study of the diverse and formidable fauna of South Africa, meticulously learning about their intricate behaviors, their preferred habitats, and their cunning hunting patterns. He spared no expense in acquiring a comprehensive arsenal of high-end hunting equipment, including a custom-crafted rifle, a masterpiece of engineering and precision, whose exorbitant cost alone surpassed the value of most people's homes. He even engaged the services of a highly sought-after personal trainer, subjecting himself to a rigorous physical regimen designed to prepare his body for the arduous and demanding rigors of the safari. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Marcus experienced a profound, almost exhilarating sense of purpose, a tangible goal that extended far beyond the mundane acquisition of material possessions. This, he convinced himself, was not merely about hunting an animal. It was about proving something fundamental to himself, about reclaiming a lost sense of masculine power and dominance that he felt had been insidiously eroded by years of existing in a world where money, in its infinite capacity, had effortlessly solved every single problem, thereby rendering his own agency largely superfluous. The formidable Cape buffalo, with its legendary ferocity and untamed power, rapidly became his metaphorical white whale, the ultimate quintessential symbol of nature's raw, untamed might that he was determined to conquer, to bring under his absolute, unyielding control. In the nascent months of 2025, Marcus, with a mixture of trepidation and fervent anticipation, formally booked his safari experience with Apex Predator Expeditions, a company that had carved out a niche for itself by specializing in providing unparalleled hunting opportunities for the world's most affluent and adventurous individuals. The price tag, a staggering $10,000, secured him a 5-day all-inclusive hunting expedition deep within the sprawling, untamed wilderness of the Kruger National Park region of South Africa. This exorbitant sum guaranteed him the services of a highly experienced personal guide, luxurious 5-star accommodations that offered a stark contrast to the rugged surroundings, and, most importantly, the coveted opportunity to hunt one of Africa's most notoriously dangerous and unpredictable animals. The buffalo, or more precisely, the African Cape buffalo, is scientifically recognized as one of the most formidable, aggressive, and utterly unpredictable creatures inhabiting the African continent. These colossal beasts, capable of tipping the scales at an astonishing 2,000 pounds, possess formidable horns that can span an impressive 4 feet across and have, over centuries, cultivated a fearsome reputation for attacking with a savage ferocity that has earned them the chilling moniker, the Black Death, among even the most seasoned and hardened hunters. They are renowned for their surprising intelligence, their uncanny ability to harbor grudges, and their disconcerting propensity to strategically ambush unsuspecting hunters who, in their hubris, believe they hold the undeniable upper hand. This inherent danger, this profound unpredictability, was precisely the magnetic allure that drew Marcus to the prospect of hunting such a creature. It represented, in his mind, the ultimate test of his courage, his skill, and his resolve, the definitive, irrefutable proof that he possessed the innate capacity to overcome any obstacle, no matter how inherently dangerous or utterly unpredictable. Upon his arrival at the opulent safari lodge, nestled deep within the South African wilderness, Marcus was formally greeted by James Hartley, a 58-year-old guide whose very presence exuded an aura of profound experience and quiet authority. James was a man whose face bore the indelible marks of countless sun-drenched days and starlit nights spent in the unforgiving African bush, his skin weathered and leathery, his eyes a piercing shade of blue, carrying the immense weight of countless life-or-death experiences that the vast majority of humanity could never even begin to comprehend. He had, over the course of his illustrious career, guided hundreds of wealthy, often demanding clients through the perilous intricacies of African hunts, and in doing so, he had cultivated an almost preternatural ability to discern the true motivations and underlying fears that simmered beneath their polished exteriors. Within the initial few minutes of their formal introduction, James, with an almost unsettling perceptiveness, recognized something within Marcus that immediately sparked a deep-seated concern within him. He perceived a man who was desperately searching for something far beyond the mere thrill of the hunt itself. A man who was, in essence, attempting to prove a fundamental truth about himself that, in James's vast experience, could never truly be validated through the violent death of an animal. James had witnessed this dangerous pattern countless times before, and with a heavy heart, he knew that it rarely, if ever, culminated in a positive outcome. The inaugural day of the safari was meticulously dedicated to the arduous and painstaking task of tracking buffalo across the vast, sprawling expanse of the Kruger National Park. Marcus, despite his initial cynicism, found himself unexpectedly captivated by the sheer, breathtaking scale and raw, untamed beauty of the landscape. He observed, with a nascent sense of wonder, the relentless African sun beating down mercilessly upon the golden savanna, its intense heat shimmering in the distance. He listened intently to the symphony of wildlife, the distant haunting calls of exotic birds, and the rustling of unseen creatures, echoing across the seemingly endless plains. James, moving with the practiced, almost effortless grace of someone who had spent their entire life intimately connected to this environment, meticulously read the subtle signs embedded in the dust, the faint imprints of hooves, the broken branches that spoke of recent passage, the telltale animal droppings that collectively narrated the intricate story of which creatures had recently traversed these ancient paths. They spotted several herds of buffalo in the hazy distance, their dark forms appearing as moving specks against the vast horizon. But James, with a deliberate and calculated caution, consciously avoided engaging with them. Instead, he dedicated the entire day to patiently educating Marcus about the complex intricacies of buffalo behavior, elucidating their surprising intelligence, the subtle nuances of their communication methods, and most importantly, emphasizing the genuine, inherent dangers that inevitably accompanied the pursuit of such a formidable creature. Marcus, though listening politely, found his patience steadily eroding. He had, after all, paid a princely sum of $10,000 for this exclusive experience, and he yearned for tangible results, not a protracted lecture on animal ethology. On the second day, as they meticulously tracked a particularly large and imposing herd, James, with his finely honed instincts, detected something that immediately filled him with a profound sense of unease. The buffalo, he observed, seemed acutely aware of their presence, an awareness that transcended mere normal animal instinct. They moved with a deliberate, almost purposeful intent, maintaining a cautious distance but never fully fleeing, as if they were meticulously assessing the perceived threat, rather than simply reacting to it in a panicked flight. James, his voice laced with a growing apprehension, attempted to convey this unsettling observation to Marcus, warning him that this particular herd appeared to be exhibiting an unusually aggressive demeanor, that the dominant bull, a colossal specimen, seemed to be adopting a protective stance that strongly suggested the utmost caution was warranted. But Marcus, fueled by an almost reckless eagerness and an unwavering conviction in his own abilities, was rapidly allowing his judgment to become clouded by his desire for conquest. He yearned to get closer, to secure the perfect definitive shot, to finally achieve the long-sought goal that had consumed his every waking thought for months. James, despite his profound reservations and growing sense of foreboding, reluctantly agreed to proceed, though he kept his powerful rifle poised and ready, his senses heightened to an almost preternatural level of alertness, a vigilance born from decades of navigating life or death situations in the unforgiving wilderness. The specific buffalo they were now tracking was a truly colossal creature, its immense frame easily exceeding 2,000 pounds, its formidable horns curving majestically upwards in a dramatic, sweeping arc that eloquently spoke of years of undisputed dominance within its herd. This was an ancient bull, a venerable patriarch who had, against all odds, survived countless perilous encounters with both natural predators and human hunters, and who had, over the course of its long and arduous life, developed an almost supernatural ability to instinctively sense and evade danger. As Marcus and James, moving with a cautious stealth, navigated through the dense waist-high grass, steadily closing the distance to the herd, the old bull, with an unexpected and startling suddenness, deliberately separated itself from the main group. It turned its massive head, its dark, intelligent eyes fixing directly upon them, its powerful body language an unmistakable declaration to anyone with even a modicum of experience in the African wilderness. This, James immediately recognized, was not a mere defensive posture. This was an unequivocal challenge, a defiant declaration that it would not, under any circumstances, be hunted without a fierce and unyielding fight. James, reacting with lightning-fast reflexes, immediately signaled for Marcus to halt, to remain absolutely motionless, but the critical damage had already been irrevocably done. The bull, with an almost chilling resolve, had committed to its course of action, and there was, in that terrifying moment, no possibility of retreat. What transpired next unfolded with a breathtaking speed and savage violence that utterly defied belief, etching itself into Marcus's memory with an indelible, horrifying clarity. The colossal buffalo, with a primal roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet, charged directly at them, covering the considerable distance between them in what felt like an agonizingly slow, yet simultaneously instantaneous blur of motion. Its massive muscular frame moved with an unstoppable power, each thundering hoof beat, sending tremors through the earth. Marcus, despite his extensive training, his expensive equipment, and his carefully cultivated bravado, found himself utterly frozen. His mind, accustomed to effortlessly resolving complex problems with the sheer force of his immense wealth and pervasive influence, simply shutting down in the face of a raw, visceral threat that could neither be negotiated with nor purchased away. James, however, reacting with the honed instincts of a true survivor, fired a shot that, though expertly aimed, only managed to strike the buffalo in the shoulder, causing the enraged creature to veer slightly, almost imperceptibly, to the left. The bullet had undoubtedly wounded the formidable animal, but it had, crucially, failed to halt its relentless, terrifying charge. The buffalo's immense momentum carried it forward with an unstoppable force, and it collided with James with a sickening, bone-jarring impact that sent the experienced guide hurtling backward through the air like a discarded rag doll. James crashed violently into the unforgiving ground with a sickening thud, the very breath knocked completely out of his lungs, his powerful rifle flying from his grasp and landing several feet away, partially obscured by the tall, swaying grass. Marcus, finally jolted out of his paralyzing stupor by the brutal impact and the guide's pained grunt, instinctively raised his own rifle, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He fired, But the shot was wild, panicked, and utterly devoid of precision, striking the buffalo in its flank rather than in a vital, incapacitating area. The animal, now bleeding profusely from two distinct wounds and further enraged by the searing pain, its eyes burning with a primal fury, abruptly shifted its terrifying attention from the fallen guide to Marcus. In that terrifying, hyper-real moment, as Marcus found himself staring directly into the dark, intelligent eyes of the very creature he had journeyed to Africa to conquer, he experienced a profound, almost revelatory clarity of thought, a stark realization that had, until this very instant, eluded him his entire privileged life. He understood with an absolute chilling certainty that his immense wealth, his vast fortune, could not, would not, save him. His billions meant absolutely nothing to this enraged, formidable animal. All the power, all the influence he had meticulously accumulated through his family's colossal pharmaceutical empire was utterly, completely useless in this raw, brutal moment of truth. The buffalo, with a renewed surge of primal energy, charged again, its massive head lowered, its formidable horns poised to strike. Marcus, his hands now shaking so violently that his vision blurred, fired his rifle repeatedly, a desperate, futile barrage of bullets. But his aim was so erratic that the vast majority of his shots went wide, harmlessly embedding themselves in the earth or whistling past the animal's thick hide. One bullet, a lucky, desperate shot, merely grazed the animal's thick neck. Another struck its powerful leg, but nothing, absolutely nothing, seemed to slow its relentless, terrifying advance. James, despite the excruciating pain that radiated through his entire body from the initial brutal collision, a pain that suggested multiple broken bones and severe internal bruising, managed, with a superhuman effort, to crawl agonizingly towards his discarded rifle. His decades of experience in the unforgiving wilderness had instilled in him a fundamental life-saving truth. Wounded animals, particularly those as formidable as the Cape buffalo, were the most dangerous, the most unpredictable, and the most relentlessly determined. He knew with an absolute certainty that this buffalo would not cease its attack until it had utterly eliminated what it perceived as the immediate existential threat. He finally reached his rifle, his fingers closing around the familiar cold metal. With a grunt of pain, he rolled onto his back, bracing himself, and fired a single, expertly aimed shot directly into the buffalo's massive chest. The bullet, a high-caliber round, struck true this time, piercing through the animal's thick ribs and embedding itself deep within its vital lungs. The buffalo, its charge finally losing its terrifying momentum, stumbled, its colossal body swaying precariously, but it did not immediately fall. Instead, with a final desperate surge of defiance, it turned its bloodshot eyes towards James, recognizing him in that moment as the source of the most recent incapacitating pain. The guide, his face contorted in a grimace of pain and determination, fired again. And this time, the colossal buffalo finally succumbed. Its massive body crashed to the earth with a thunderous, ground-shaking force that seemed to reverberate across the entire savanna, sending a cloud of dust and dry grass into the air. For a long, agonizing moment, an almost deafening silence descended upon the scene, broken only by the ragged, heavy breathing of the two men, the distant, mournful calls of unseen birds, and the gentle, rhythmic whisper of the wind rustling through the tall, dry grass. James lay on his back, his body screaming in protest, meticulously assessing the damage to his battered frame. He discovered, with a mixture of relief and grim acceptance, that while he was undoubtedly badly bruised, likely suffering from several broken ribs, and experiencing a throbbing pain in his collarbone, he was, miraculously, still alive. Marcus, however, remained utterly frozen. his powerful rifle still raised, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror, staring fixedly at the lifeless body of the magnificent animal that had, only moments before, come terrifyingly close to ending his life. The buffalo's dark, intelligent eyes were open, staring blankly up at the vast, indifferent African sky, its massive chest no longer rising and falling with the rhythm of breath. In that profound, almost spiritual moment, Marcus felt something fundamental shift deep within his very being. A profound, almost cataclysmic realization that the hunt, the grand adventure he had so meticulously planned, had not, in any conceivable way, unfolded as he had so arrogantly imagined. This was not a triumph. This was, unequivocally, a tragedy. He had journeyed to the heart of Africa, driven by an insatiable desire to prove his dominance over nature, to assert his control over the wild. Instead, he had been brutally forced to confront his own fragile mortality, his inherent vulnerability, his utter insignificance in the face of forces far greater, far more ancient, and far more powerful than himself. The illusion of his invincibility, meticulously constructed over 5 decades of privilege, had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. James, despite the excruciating pain that coursed through his entire body, was eventually transported back to the safari lodge by a medical helicopter, its rotors slicing through the still African air. There, he received immediate and comprehensive medical attention for his severe injuries. The attending doctors, after a thorough examination, confirmed his initial self-diagnosis: 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and extensive severe bruising across his entire body. They assured him, however, that he would make a full recovery, albeit a slow and painful one. Marcus, though physically unharmed, was profoundly and irrevocably shattered psychologically. He spent that night alone in his luxurious cabin, the opulent surroundings now feeling utterly alien and suffocating. He stared blankly out at the vast, inky blackness of the African landscape, unable to sleep, unable to escape the relentless, horrifying replay of the day's events in his tormented mind. He thought, with a newfound clarity, about Sarah's poignant, prophetic words, about the gnawing emptiness that had, in its insidious way, driven him to this perilous, life-altering place. He reflected on the $10,000 he had so casually spent, a sum that now seemed utterly insignificant, in his desperate, misguided pursuit of something that had, in the most brutal and visceral way imaginable, nearly cost him his very life. His thoughts then drifted to his late father, to the colossal pharmaceutical empire that had been meticulously built upon the suffering of countless individuals who depended on their medications to survive, to the myriad moral compromises that had been ruthlessly made in the relentless pursuit of profit and unbridled power. The weight of his family's legacy, once a source of pride, now felt like an unbearable burden of guilt. The following morning, Marcus, with a quiet resolve that surprised everyone, including himself, made a decision that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of his life. He immediately cancelled the remainder of his meticulously planned safari experience, forfeiting the substantial sum he had paid, and booked the earliest possible flight back to the United States. Before his departure, he made a point of visiting James in the lodge's makeshift medical facility, his face etched with a profound remorse. He offered a sincere, heartfelt apology, not merely for the terrifying incident itself, but for his ingrained arrogance, for his deeply flawed belief that he could simply purchase his way through life without ever having to face the inevitable consequences of his actions. James, despite the throbbing pain that still racked his body, managed a weak, knowing smile and imparted a piece of wisdom to Marcus that would forever resonate within him. The buffalo, Marcus, did not attack you out of malice or a desire for revenge. It attacked you because you brazenly invaded its home, because you directly threatened its family, because you, in its eyes, represented an undeniable danger to everything it held sacred. In that terrifying moment, you were not the hunter. You were the invader, and the buffalo, in its primal wisdom, was simply defending what was rightfully its own. That, Marcus, is a profound lesson that no amount of money can ever teach you. But the untamed African savanna, in its brutal honesty, most certainly can. Marcus returned to the bustling, indifferent metropolis of New York, a profoundly changed man. The transformation was not immediate or superficial. It was a deep, fundamental shift in his core being. He began the arduous process of liquidating significant portions of his vast wealth, not for personal gain, but to channel it towards meaningful causes. He made substantial anonymous donations to various conservation efforts across Africa, meticulously funding organizations dedicated to the protection of endangered wildlife and the preservation of their rapidly diminishing natural habitats. He consciously stepped back from his prominent role in the day-to-day operations of the pharmaceutical company, ceding control to other, more ethically minded family members, allowing them to steer the colossal ship in a direction that prioritized human well-being over unbridled profit. He resumed therapy, but this time his commitment was genuine. His desire to understand himself, to heal the deep-seated wounds that had been inflicted by a lifetime of unearned privilege and profound emptiness, was absolute. He even, with a mixture of trepidation and hope, reached out to Sarah, his ex-wife, offering a sincere, heartfelt apology for the myriad ways he had failed her, for the insidious ways his relentless obsession with wealth and power had systematically prevented him from being truly present and emotionally available in their relationship. Sarah, genuinely surprised by the profound sincerity of his transformation, by the palpable shift in his demeanor, cautiously agreed to meet him for coffee, and slowly, tentatively, they began the arduous process of rebuilding a fragile friendship that had been systematically destroyed by years of neglect and emotional distance. Marcus never again set foot on the African continent, and he never again raised a rifle in pursuit of an animal. The $10,000 he had so casually spent on that ill-fated safari became, in his profoundly altered mind, the single most valuable investment he had ever made in his entire life. Not because it had resulted in the violent death of an animal, but because it had, in its brutal and unexpected way, catalyzed the spiritual rebirth of a man who had, for decades, been spiritually dead, adrift in a sea of material excess and existential despair. He often found himself reflecting on the buffalo, on the sheer, unbridled ferocity and unwavering purpose with which it had charged at him. And through these reflections, he came to a profound understanding. The animal had, in its raw, untamed wisdom, bestowed upon him something far more precious, far more invaluable than any mere trophy could ever hope to provide. It had gifted him the invaluable present of perspective, the humbling realization that there existed forces in this vast, complex world that could neither be controlled nor purchased. And that true power, genuine strength, emanated not from dominating nature, but from respectfully coexisting with it, from recognizing that humanity was merely one small, interconnected part of a much larger, intricate ecosystem that deserved, above all else, to be preserved and protected. Years later, whenever people, intrigued by his dramatic transformation, inquired about his infamous safari experience, Marcus would, with a quiet solemnity, recount the unvarnished truth of what had transpired. He would speak openly about how terrifyingly close he had come to losing his life, about how a wild animal, in its primal wisdom, had taught him more profound truths about himself than any amount of money, any number of therapy sessions could ever have hoped to achieve. He would speak of the buffalo with a reverence that often surprised his listeners, describing the unwavering courage and unyielding conviction with which it had defended its territory, a display of natural power that, he admitted, put human ambition and arrogance to shame. And he would invariably conclude his compelling narrative with the same resonant message, that life's most valuable, most transformative lessons often emerge from those harrowing moments when we are brutally forced to confront our own inherent insignificance, when we are stripped bare of all our carefully constructed defenses and compelled to face the raw, unvarnished reality of our fragile existence. The buffalo, he would often say, had been his most profound teacher, and the vast, untamed African savanna, his most unforgiving yet ultimately enlightening classroom. The tuition he had paid for this invaluable education was a staggering $10,000 and almost his very life. But what Marcus, in his newfound wisdom and humility, did not know, what he would in all likelihood never truly comprehend, was that the buffalo's ferocious attack had not been a simple, impulsive act of animal aggression. It had been something far more deliberate, far more calculated, far more terrifyingly strategic than anyone, even James Hartley, could have initially imagined. The full, unvarnished truth about what had truly transpired on that fateful day deep within the Kruger National Park was a heavy, burdensome secret that James Hartley would carry with him, unspoken and unshared, for the remainder of his days. It was a profound mystery that would haunt his waking thoughts and permeate his dreams every time he closed his weary eyes at night. Because James, with his unparalleled understanding of the African wilderness and its inhabitants, knew something fundamental about that particular buffalo. Something about the uncanny precision with which it had moved, something about the chilling intelligence that gleamed in its dark, ancient eyes, that strongly suggested this was not the first time it had encountered a human hunter. This was not the first time it had been wounded by the cold, impersonal force of human weaponry. And crucially, this was not the first time it had made a conscious, deliberate decision to take matters into its own formidable hands and permanently eliminate the perceived threat. The buffalo, as James knew from hushed conversations among the local trackers and guides, had been hunted before, years earlier, by another wealthy, equally arrogant client, who in his incompetence had merely wounded it, leaving the magnificent creature to suffer a slow, agonizing death in the unforgiving African bush. The animal, against all odds, had miraculously survived the ordeal, but it had been irrevocably changed by the traumatic experience. It had been transformed, not merely from a simple creature of instinct into something more dangerous, but into something profoundly more aware, more cunning, something that possessed a deep, visceral understanding of the existential threat that humans, with their powerful rifles and their insatiable desire for conquest, represented. And when Marcus and James had, in their hubris, approached that day, the buffalo, with its heightened senses and its long, bitter memory, had immediately recognized the glint of the hunting rifles, had instantly perceived the familiar, ominous scent of the human predator. It had, with a chilling, almost human-like resolve, made a conscious, strategic decision to strike first, to eliminate the danger before it could, once again, be eliminated itself. This was not a random accident. This was not a chaotic, impulsive act of animal aggression. This was, in its purest, most brutal form, nature's meticulously planned revenge, nature's ancient, unyielding way of fighting back against the relentless, destructive cycle of human exploitation and unbridled domination. The buffalo had learned, and it had adapted, becoming a silent, formidable guardian of its own existence. James had seen the chilling intelligence in the buffalo's eyes as it charged, had recognized the deliberate, almost tactical precision in its movements, and had understood in that terrifying, crystal-clear moment that they were not merely hunting an animal. They were, in fact, being hunted by one. The buffalo, with an almost preternatural cunning, had meticulously set a trap, allowing them to approach close enough to feel a false sense of confidence in their perceived superiority. And then, with a sudden, devastating burst of power, It had struck with a precision and timing that strongly suggested years of patient, strategic planning. And as James lay on the ground, his body broken and bleeding, watching Marcus fire his rifle in a desperate, panicked frenzy, he realized, with a profound sense of awe and terror, that the buffalo was not attempting to kill them out of mere anger or primal fear. It was, in its own brutal, uncompromising way, attempting to impart a profound, unforgettable lesson, the very same lesson that the ancient, untamed African savanna had been tirelessly attempting to teach humanity for thousands upon thousands of years, that nature is not a mere resource to be ruthlessly exploited, that animals are not simply inanimate trophies to be collected and displayed, and that the precise moment you, as a human, begin to believe that you possess absolute dominion over the natural world is the precise moment you become most profoundly vulnerable to its inevitable, unyielding wrath. The buffalo, in its raw, untamed power, was merely an instrument of this ancient, immutable truth. The buffalo, against all odds, survived the brutal encounter, though it was severely wounded. James, with a quiet, almost conspiratorial determination, made sure of that. He fired his final, incapacitating shots in such a way that while severely injuring the animal, they would ultimately allow it to escape into the deeper, more inaccessible parts of the park, where it could, hopefully, heal its grievous wounds and continue its life, far away from the destructive presence of human hunters. He never, not once, reported the full extent of the buffalo's injuries to the authorities, never admitted that he had, with a deliberate and conscious intent, allowed the magnificent animal to survive. Instead, he meticulously adhered to the official story, the carefully constructed narrative that made logical sense to individuals who possessed no genuine understanding of the intricate, often brutal, realities of the African wilderness, the version of events that conveniently allowed Marcus to return home and embark upon his profound, life-altering transformation. But James, with his deep, almost spiritual connection to the land and its creatures, knew the unvarnished truth, and he carried that truth with him, a heavy, unspoken weight that would never fully lift from his weary shoulders. It was a secret that bound him to the wild, a testament to his respect for its untamed power. Years slowly passed, blurring into decades, and the buffalo, the legendary Black Death of the savanna, gradually evolved into a mythical figure among the seasoned guides and local trackers of the Kruger National Park. It became a creature of legend, whispered about around crackling campfires under the vast, star-studded African sky. A formidable beast that had, against all odds, survived multiple relentless hunts that had cunningly outsmarted countless predators, both human and animal, and that had, through sheer resilience and an almost preternatural intelligence, somehow managed to not only survive, but to thrive in one of the world's most dangerous and unforgiving ecosystems. Some, with a mixture of awe and fear, claimed it had finally been brought down by ruthless poachers. Others, with a knowing glint in their eyes, insisted it still roamed the deepest, most remote corners of the park, older, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous than ever before. But James, with his intimate knowledge and his unwavering belief, knew better. He knew with an absolute certainty that transcended mere speculation that the buffalo was still alive, still hunting, still, in its own silent, powerful way, teaching profound, unforgettable lessons to anyone foolish enough to believe they could conquer the untamed African wilderness with nothing more than the fleeting power of money and the cold, impersonal force of weapons. And he knew, with a chilling premonition, that if Marcus Wellington, in a moment of misguided hubris, ever dared to return to Africa, if he ever decided to foolishly attempt to finish what he had so arrogantly started, the buffalo would be patiently waiting for him, ready, willing, and able to complete the brutal, unforgettable lesson it had so dramatically begun all those years ago. The savanna, after all, never forgets. This then is the profound and cautionary tale of how a pharmaceutical heir, a man born into unimaginable wealth and privilege, was brutally forced to learn that money, in its infinite capacity, cannot, in fact, purchase everything. It is the story of how a wild, untamed buffalo, in its primal wisdom and unyielding ferocity, taught a man the true, humbling meaning of vulnerability, of mortality, and of his own inherent insignificance in the grand tapestry of existence. It is the chilling narrative of how the ancient, unforgiving African savanna, in its raw, untamed power, exacted its inevitable revenge upon those who, in their profound arrogance, believed they could exploit its boundless resources and dominate its formidable creatures without ever having to face the dire, inescapable consequences. It is a story that speaks volumes about the exorbitant price of human arrogance, the indomitable power of nature, and the profound, often brutal, transformative potential that lies hidden within the terrifying precipice of nearly dying. It is a story that should serve as an urgent, unequivocal warning to anyone who, in their misguided hubris, believes they can effortlessly purchase their way through life, who naively thinks they can dominate nature without ever having to face its inevitable, unyielding wrath, who arrogantly assumes that immense wealth and pervasive power can somehow protect them from the fundamental, immutable truths of human existence. The buffalo, in its ancient primal wisdom, understood these profound truths long before Marcus Wellington ever dared to set foot on the sacred, untamed soil of Africa, and it was, in its uncompromising way, willing to teach them, no matter what the ultimate, devastating cost. The echoes of that fateful day still reverberate across the savanna, a timeless testament to nature's enduring power and humanity's fragile place within it. This is the untold story of Marcus Wellington and the buffalo that changed everything. But here's what you need to know. The truth about what really happened that day in South Africa is far more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Subscribe to our channel right now to uncover the complete story, the secrets that James Hartley carried to his grave, and the real reason why that buffalo attacked with such precision and intelligence. The African savanna has many mysteries, and we're dedicated to uncovering every single one. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of truth seekers who refuse to accept the official narrative. Because sometimes, the most dangerous predator in the wilderness isn't the animal with the biggest teeth. It's the one with the intelligence to plan, to remember, and to seek revenge. Welcome to the real story of the hunt that became the hunted.